I didn't bring my old one. So all my notes.
Thank you. As soon as Art is...
Where's that?
As soon as you can. Tell me. The school board meeting of Tuesday, July 6, 1993 is called to order. The first item on the agenda is adjustments to agenda. Are there any adjustments? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of school board minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve tonight. First is the special board meeting of Thursday, June 9th, 1993. Are there any adjustments?
Madam Chairman, on the third paragraph down at 5:12 p.m., we need to add the student's parents, and the attorney were also present.
Okay.
That was the actual hearing.
Right. Any other changes? Okay. Seeing none, those stand approved with the changes noted. The next minutes were the orientation school board meeting of Monday, June 14th, 1993. Any changes? No? Seeing none, those stand approved. And the last are the regular school board meeting of Tuesday, June 15th, 1993. Any changes? No? Seeing none, those stand approved. The next item on the agenda is communications, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Basically, we have none at this point. I might point out that you've just received your amended draft, which is a kind of communication, but we will be going over that in the meeting with the architects.
Okay. Any other communications from the board? Okay. The next item is the superintendent's report, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
And this also will be very quick. Just wanted to call to the board's attention that I did send out a memo. I believe you received a copy of it, as well as all staff, and I mean all support staff, as well as our teaching staff, indicating some opportunities for total quality training this summer, and indicating some, at least, of what the opportunities will be next fall. And I certainly welcome all board members to attend any of those sessions. If you have any questions, please let me know. In some cases, I've been asked, would it be all right if I came to part of them and not all of them? And I think at this point, any familiarity is better than no familiarity, so you're welcome.
Okay. The next item is school board subcommittees and reports, and we have only one report tonight from the Finance Subcommittee Chair, Peter Leslie.
Thank you. We don't usually meet in July, so it's premature to talk about the year-end closing of our accounts. We'll do that later on. But we did do one very important thing. Those of us who hadn't met Scott Poulin, our new business manager, met him this evening. He's sitting right over there, and I want to welcome him to Cape Elizabeth, and we all look forward to working with him. That's my report. Thank you.
Okay. The next item is unfinished business, and first we have approval of the proposed renovation project for the middle school and Pond Cove School, and I'll turn it over to the Building Committee Chair, Paula Liberty.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, and Superintendent Goldman. It's certainly a pleasure to be here tonight to present and discuss the recommendation of the Middle School Building Committee for renovations and additions to both the middle and Pond Cove schools. I would like to thank the members of the committee, teacher volunteers who formed our advisory committee, and staff who gave of their time and talents during the past 8 months. The report before you presents a comprehensive solution to the physical problems of our buildings and space needs defined by the previous school space study committee and recognized by both the school board and the town council. Our committee inspected the facilities, read the studies, and concluded that a real need exists. Building systems have exceeded their reasonable life expectancy. For example, parts cannot be found for unit ventilators. Current building code deficiencies, which affect life and safety, must be corrected. Barriers to the physically impaired need to be provided. or corrected. Unsafe site traffic patterns are of concern. Insufficient space to meet current programming, such as physical education space for the elementary school. Replacement of temporary structures, some have or will exceed their permitted occupancy. In her memorandum of July 1st, 1993 to the school board and town council, Superintendent Goldman offers an overview of the real needs, and we concur. Unfortunately, an easy and inexpensive solution to provide a facility consistent with our educational program for the next 20 years is not possible. The committee undertook a systematic approach by defining a mission statement, states our goals and objectives. A program presents educational program and physical space needs, and a conceptual plan defines the architectural and design solutions to meet the mission and program. The committee and design team of Stevens, Morton, Rose, and Thompson consulted with local officials, boards, and other committees to ensure our recommendation would be consistent with the community's objective, such as the town center report. Alternatives and options for various building and site configurations were discussed and considered. We investigated complete replacement, separate buildings, and options for connecting the two buildings, just to mention a few. Cost to implement the recommendation has been a constant concern to the committee, and we are cognizant of the impact in the community. We all concur and endorse the conceptual plan as a comprehensive solution to provide a physical plan adequate to support and enhance our educational program. It is a balanced approach, combining rehabilitation and new construction to solve our very real needs. It also has the advantage of providing community space in the process. At this time, I would like to present Mr. Arthur Thompson of SMRT, the principal in charge, who will present the design solutions.
Thank you, Paul. Committee members, with me tonight is Paul Stevens, another partner in Stevens, Morton, Rose, and Thompson. We have been working with another person from our team, Ellen Belknap, who is swatting mosquitoes on the Allagash, I think, tonight probably. I hope it's really hot there. I'm sure it is. I'm going to take a moment just to review some of the process that we went through in our seems like months and months and months of deliberation on both the site and the building configuration, as well as the program. Talk a little bit in detail about some of the site options that we investigated and why we as a committee wound up where we did wind up, and review the building configuration. I know that you folks have had a package for a few days, and I'm sure you read every word over the 4th of July weekend. I handed out a few moments ago a revised package which is very similar in content to what was delivered to you last week. There are a few changes, however, in syntax, and we caught a few spelling errors, and but also we spent a little more time explaining where the budget numbers came from, and as well where the program, how the program was developed. The colors, the photographs are now in color, so it makes it a little bit more interesting reading. It's still a draft, however. There is still work to be done. There's still work ongoing, both in our office as well as in the office of some other consultants. Currently underway is a traffic study looking at some of the traffic ramifications of the site decisions that the committee has made. And starting as of today, there is a further investigation of the asbestos conditions in all of the buildings. The asbestos was previously pegged at, I think, $460,000 item. It's likely that that will be more, and I think we upped it in this budget to $600,000. We're hoping with the help of Northeast Test Consultants that we can hone that figure more clearly over the summer, and additionally we can get guidance and advice with regards to the impact that the asbestos removal and remediation will have on the phasing of the project. which when we're considering a project like this where all the kids have to stay in school is, of course, of primary importance. Let me take a moment now. I guess I was told I have to drag this with me. Get it out. Let me take a moment now and talk about the site configuration that we finally wound up with. Just to orient you, I know this is a long ways away. You have a reduction of this in your package if you want to follow along there. This is Scott Dyer here and 77 out here. This is the existing middle school location and the existing elementary school location, Public Works, Public Safety, and the high school building over here. There are a number of considerations, site considerations really, that drove the programming and concept design solution for this project. Prime among the directives from the committee was we've got to solve our site safety problems. Currently there is traffic moving between the two buildings. The so-called plaza or esplanade or whatever you want to call it between those two buildings is really an oversized parking lot. That creates a lot of safety problems and as well as it just is not a very nice kind of space to have around a middle and elementary school. And interestingly enough, as we got into the project, we discovered that the existence of that circulation pattern between those two schools, which was previously, as you know, two-way, that circulation pattern really drove the configuration and planning for just about, I think, every decision with regards to those two school projects over the last 40, 50, or 60 years. In fact, in researching our work, we found that way back 40 years ago, there was a plan developed for linking the old high school and the old elementary school out here, and that had been abandoned in favor of keeping that circulation pattern. So eliminating that circulation pattern became sort of the key to solving the organizational problem on this site, and that's what this plan and configuration does. Let me run through what the design assumes. We assume a complete separation of bus and automobile traffic. The automobile traffic comes in off Scott Dyer Road in approximately the location of the existing roadway along the playing field. We anticipate needing to move that field, that road away from the neighbors and creating a stronger buffer. That comes in this direction here and has a drop-off to the middle and elementary schools at the south end of the complex, and parking is developed along that route into the front, the new front of the building. That parking also provides additional, provides special event parking, obviously, for the use of all these fields. The bus access comes in Jordan Way, drops off, picks up, and exit through the high school. The playing fields are basically remain intact. One of the program requirements was that all of the playing fields that exist on the site today are kept in place. The two buildings, as we will see in a moment, are linked in this location here, creating a plaza where the current parking and through traffic is. Obviously, we will also locate some emergency access into and through that plaza area. This area here will likely be a play field for the elementary school. And additionally, some parking, 36 spaces are shown here at the north end of the elementary school. We're not really suggesting a major reconfiguration of the elementary school, and that's a long building as it is. So there is some parking here for the elementary school, some parking here, and the remainder for the middle school and visitors and the public. As far as the building configuration is concerned, we have a floor plan here that's color-coded. You have also a copy of that in your pamphlet and the model that we have developed in front of you. Why don't I take a run through the floor plan, and then I'll spend a moment over with the model as well. Basically, the major change, if you will, in the project is the connection of the two buildings. The elementary school configuration remains basically in its current plan, although there'll be substantial modifications to those spaces and to those rooms, and some minor additions in terms of the media center. The elementary school has adequate classrooms, if you will, but lacks most of the major spaces like media center, gymnasium, cafeteria, special education, art space, and science space. So the cafetorium and elementary school gymnasium bridges between the middle school and the elementary school. The cafetorium still meets the eating needs of both schools on a four-service basis. It is, however, sized to accommodate the student body of either the elementary school or the middle school in total in that space. The site steps down from the elementary school to the middle school, and as such, the cafetorium also steps down. So, steps up. So we have, in effect, a performance space that can serve both the middle school and the elementary school. The middle school is totally reorganized internally. As you can see from your diagrams, that the D wing and the bus garage have been demolished, as well as the portables there and the portables here. And the middle school has been reorganized in houses between the 5th, the 7th, the 6th, and on the upper level, the 8th grade up here. What results is a middle school that is more compact and more efficient and organized more closely around the middle school philosophy. If you take a moment now and take a look at the model, if I can do this without tipping it over. This is the new proposed entrance at the south end of the building here. This is the original 1931 high school up here. You can see that much of the existing building remains on both sides of the project. But what is significant here is the connection between the two buildings. Architecturally, the 1931 high school building really becomes a point of departure, if you will, for much of the architectural detail that is developed around the addition to that building, as well as the entrance to the new middle school. It was important, we felt, and the committee felt, that both the middle and the elementary school have a discernible and separate entrance. And you can see perhaps on this model more easily the difference between the elementary school entrance and the middle school entrance. You can also see on this model very, very clearly the difference between the bus drop-off and the automobile drop-off. One of the things that this configuration does, I think, very well on the site is by keeping that separation, it allows an easy access for the students out to the playing fields without crossing any either bus or automobile traffic. Internally in the courtyards, the architecture takes its point of departure from the two media centers, this being the middle school and this being the new elementary school, which is really just an expansion of the existing gymnasium and cafeteria. The existing middle school gymnasium stays in its place. It's wrapped by a new administrative wing, and again, the connection of the cafetorium and the kitchen behind. The current link that exists here that has the new re-roofing on it right now is basically added to on both this side and on this side, producing that two-story classroom wing that I talked about earlier. This section of the building remains basically as it is. Of course, it will be totally rehabbed, as well as the applied arts portion of the middle school program. And this wing here as well remains pretty much intact. You can begin to see the development of major nodes of circulation in both these buildings. One of the issues that the committee felt strongly about while the elementary school is remaining pretty much as it is right now, it was felt strongly that the middle school needed a sort of a central focus to its program, to its plan. And where you see that skylight is the major vertical circulation point in that facility. In this case, currently there is a portable construction here that will be removed, as well as a small piece of the Lunt building, and then a 2-story piece of new construction added to the Lunt building and that link. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Paul for a minute, who's going to talk about briefly about the sort of vital statistics of the project, the cost numbers, the program numbers, and I know that we want to leave you plenty of time for your questions.
Thanks, Art. One of the things that you'll notice in the draft report that we handed out tonight is that we've added a little bit more by way of introduction and explanation to both the space program and to the cost estimate on the project, or the budget estimate, I should call it, to explain that better for everybody. I think it's important to note that the space program was prepared in very close attention with both the teaching and administrative staffs of both of the schools. We went through and identified each of the existing spaces and how it was being used. We compared the existing space within the two schools to the State Department of Education standards for appropriate square footages for these kinds of spaces, and in compiling the program came up with a deficiency for each school in terms of the program area that was required in each school. If you'll turn to your programs, you can see the summary of the square footages, and without going into it in a lot of detail, we'll be glad to answer questions later. We have 59,600 square feet in the elementary school program, and we have a total of 85,162 square feet in the middle school program. I think it's interesting to note some of the facts in terms of the square footage that you currently have on site, in that the current area of the middle school is 87,594 square feet, and I think I'd probably round that off to maybe either 87 or 88, since we aren't exactly sure based on the drawings of within a few hundred square feet one way or another, and that the total area of the elementary school is about 45 or 46,000 square feet right now. So you can see that there was adequate space within the middle school as it exists now, but it is very poorly used and spread out all over the place, and a great deal of it wasted in unusable square footage and circulation and so forth. Whereas in the elementary school, we were actually short program square footage to the tune of about 15,000 square feet within that building that needed to be added. And those of you who are familiar with the building will know that wasn't so much in classroom space as it was in all the added amenities such as media center and gymnasium and cafeteria, so forth, art room, science room, etc. The statistics in terms of the total project are that we're adding or ending up with a plant of about 133,000 square feet, and out of that we're renovating 88,000 square feet, and we have the existing construction is about 133,000 square feet, and our total new construction is going to be about 145,000 square feet, and out of that we're renovating 88 and building new 57, which gives us a total increase in the area between the two schools of somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12,000 square feet. If you turn to your budget, and discovered that we'd made a typographical error tonight when I was reading the finished report. So there's a loose sheet in your report that explains the budget. The bottom line doesn't change, but you'll note what we had done is that we had omitted the site development costs and misstated the systems and surface reno. But the way we went about putting together this estimate was to use guidelines that we've used in the past and found to be true for other similar types of construction, and did what we call a square foot unit cost estimate, breaking the building down into new construction, major renovations, systems and surface renovations, an estimate for site development, and then on top of those large construction numbers, we added a factor for administrative and fees, and also, as Arthur mentioned earlier, an asbestos removal number, leaving us with a total project cost of a little over $11,600,000. I've added on here all of the things at the bottom of the page and on the next page that this budget contains. And at this point in time, they're not all detailed out, but the number that's been stated is intended to include all of these figures. Obviously, at this stage in design, we cannot do a detailed cost estimate. So these budgets are very much based on the concept that we have at this point in time. I think it's also important to note that we have tried to take into consideration an economical approach to renovating the buildings so that we are not going out and sort of willy-nilly replacing everything, and we're going to be making the best use of what you have that we possibly can. It's also important to note that the budget that we have set really is a framework, and that there are many design and program decisions that are going to need to be made during the development of the project. The number may change possibly between now and the end of the summer, a little bit one way or another, as we finalize or improve, I should say, our asbestos estimate and come out and do some more work in terms of a little bit of work on the site to identify some spot grades, to find out how realistic some of our estimates are in terms of grading, and also to take a look at the buildings in terms of the exterior envelope regarding both the roofs and the existing curtain walls in terms of the actual amount of that needs to be replaced and the extent of repair. And that's all very much mixed up with the asbestos study, because there is asbestos in both the roof fabrics as well as the panels on the exterior wall. So it's something that's going to have to be all knit together over the course of the summer. And I guess the final piece is the phasing program, which again, this is an initial suggestion, and one of the major pieces of this is going to be how we handle the asbestos mitigation along with the development of the plan. So this phasing may change as we hear from our asbestos consultant over the course of the summer. Our goal is to renovate the two buildings over the course of 2 years, which I think is an ambitious goal. We also want to do this in as large a piece as we can as we go along, so that we won't be in a continual state of disruption. The first phase will be to construct the administrative and mechanical areas that go with the middle school, and the connecting link, which is the elementary school gymnasium and the cafetorium, as well as the small addition that we're inserting between the lunch school and the adjacent classroom building where the current portable is located. While that's going on, there will be kids moved out of the school and located in the portable classrooms, which you can see indicated in the center of the diagram there, and that may not end up being the actual location, but for diagrammatic purposes, I think it seemed convenient between the two schools. And we'll be moving elementary kids in and out of those portables during the renovation of the elementary school, and we'll be moving the middle school kids in and out of them during that renovation. By the end of the first year, or actually by December of '95, we expect to have the elementary school completed and fully operational. And as I say, the asbestos may be one of the key issues in this. Phase 2, which is the middle school, 2A is the big piece, which is the media center and the expansion of the B wing connecting link, which will build our 7th and 8th grade classroom pods, and also will renovate the high school building, the old high school building for the 6th grade. The other wings within that building, which are phases 2B and 2C, will follow along shortly after that, so that by August of 1996, we hope to have the building fully occupiable by both the elementary and middle school kids. And then Phase 3 is the completion of the site work. We will need to demolish the D wing after we move the kids into the new middle school and finish up the parking lots and so forth associated with that piece of the project. So I think as quickly as Art and I could go through it in a nutshell, that's where we are tonight, and we'll be continuing to work on this during the course of the summer, and we'll be certainly glad to take questions from anybody on any part of this. Well, thank you.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Does anybody on the board have any questions or comments? Charlie?
Did you?
I'll wait.
Go ahead. I've been on the committee, so.
Oh, okay. I would also like to commend the work of the committee and the professional architects involved. I have two questions. My concern about the demolition of the bus garage, and I was just wondering if there had been any comments from anyone who might be working on the vehicles considered in your discussion?
Yes, they have commented, and the concern that they raise to Connie Goldman, the superintendent, by letter deals with the vandalism issue and the maintenance issue and the starting of the vehicles in cold weather. I think it was the feeling of the committee that many of those can be dealt with by a good location for those vehicles and by providing power for block heaters and that sort of thing. And I guess the importance of removing the bus garage from the standpoint of sort of solving the site problems, if you will, can't be stressed more firmly, I think, because the D-wing and the bus garage really stand in the way of getting access from Scott Dyer Road to a new front door for that building. So it really became an important part of the solution.
I understand in the scheme that the garage as we know it needs to go, but I was just wondering, and obviously you've had the discussion and found that we will have the available resources to do whatever it takes to protect the vehicles.
Yes, probably not an enclosed bus garage at this point, but I'm
But at
sure-
least what it takes.
Yes.
I guess that's all I was concerned. And I had asked at one of the early meetings about air conditioning, and I wasn't trying to be funny then, and I'm not trying to be funny now.
I don't know why.
But it's a perfect opportunity in July to raise it.
Yes, that was a very good point to raise, and I think some other people on the committee brought that point up early on, and we've discussed it with our mechanical engineers as well in terms of the cost ramifications of sizing the system so that it can be converted to air conditioning in the future, and that's one of the things we'll be looking closely at.
Because if I may, just an editorial comment, I really do think we'll be going to year-round schooling, and I think the only way we could offer that is to have
Absolutely, yeah.
the opposite of heating. Thank you very much.
Peter?
I also wanted to compliment you on the design. This is the first time I've seen it because I just got back, not from the Alley Cat.
You're lucky.
Flying mosquito. I think it's terrific at first glance. I would like to just ask a question about the numbers. It seems to me they still don't add up. Maybe there's $50,000 that needs to be chased down.
I'll let Paul do the numbers.
Oh, you're gonna
5 million I might be able to find tonight, but I'm not sure I can find $50,000. Let me see.
Well, I think it adds up to 11,677,000, but somebody else who has a calculator double check me. But before we go too much public with these things, you know, we ought to make sure they're right. I think the first column looks like 8,320,540.
I didn't check our math from the last submittal to the, to the school building committee, so it sounds like I ought to do that. I didn't go back and re-add those numbers, so. But if it's $50,000, we will get that straightened out. I think I will plan to, having just caught the mistakes that I found tonight coming in here, to add, to basically reissue the report, and we'll double check the math.
Well,
at the
don't
same
do it
time.
for just this,
So.
this one sheet, but...
Is that it?
That's all I could find
That's the
so
only-
far.
Okay.
That's a good kind
Limited
of question to have, so.
But I think the design's terrific.
Charlie?
A couple questions. One was on the phase-in, in Phase 1A. We would be taking out the existing portable, which now houses the media center. So I'm assuming the media center will go to a portable classroom.
Yes, what we're doing, and it's I think the best solution that we've seen at this point in time, and is directed at trying to get as much of the school done at one time, and also to disrupt as few kids. We've taken that existing portable, and if you look at the sheet that's in your report, and moved it to sort of almost off the bottom of the page, and we're connecting around that construction that's going on between the Lunt School and the remainder of the school with new construction. And we will have an exit stair coming out of, temporary exit stair coming out of a second floor classroom in the Lunt building, coming down and connecting into a corridor which will go through that media center or through that portable as it does now, and then reconnect with the other side. So we're just moving that portable out onto the playground is what we're doing.
I remember that discussion, but
Right.
I really think it should be in the report. Because if people think that the
yeah.
portable classrooms are where the media center is going to be,
Right.
you're going to have some questions about children
point.
going out in the winter, that kind of, because the
Yes.
major construction of Phase 1 is over the winter.
We're going to have to get a bigger piece of paper.
That's right. But it could be reflected in your notes on Phase
Yes.
1. The other question was under your square footages, when you're looking at programming. Are structure and services increased, those square footages, or are those what we have existing?
Those are the ones that we've been using all along.
I mean, are those what we have existing in the current buildings, or
No,
is this
no.
an increase?
This is, to tell you the truth, I don't know the answer to that question, because I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, which I don't have with me tonight, for how much of the existing buildings currently are structure and service, and I don't have that number with me.
We're
But the
talking
num-
about mechanical services.
Right. The number that's in here is the plan that you see before you is the amount of circulation and service space, halls and walls, if you will, within the new proposed plan. And I don't know how that compares in regard to efficiency to the old plan. We can certainly find that out.
Peter?
I can't resist this one because I think I'm a frustrated architect. And I'm going to try to refrain during this process from making questions in the aesthetic area. But I was wondering if there was much debate over the two entrances being similar.
Are you a plant? Somebody said you were.
No, I'm not. I just got back, not from the Allagash.
We moved this one in. We had a couple of other ones. I don't think we brought that one tonight.
No, we had some vastly different, actually, we settled on this one fairly quickly, but the elementary school entrance, we debated at length between sort of a more contemporary box that stood out here, more separate, more pulled out of the building, and finally settled on a consensus in the committee that it should be more traditionally set back in the building as it sits there. The form, of course, relates to
Well, if you'd come in here and put this down the other way, I probably wouldn't have asked the question. But it seemed to be an obvious opportunity to have two identical buildings, and anyway.
Yes, but the committee felt strongly that the elementary school should have a different front door than the middle school. And not only should their entrances be different, but that sort of reflects somewhat of a rite of passage, if you will, from the elementary school to the middle school. So the whole entrance sequence is significantly different in the two buildings.
Well, my question was there debate? The answer is yes. That's great.
Well, I was just going to add on to Peter's concern here. One of the things that came up early on about a joined building versus a unified building was, would it look too monolithic, and would kids really know that they were going from one school to another? And that was one way we decided.
Right. There was a lot of discussion about these issues. I mean, it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Also, the concern that if we joined the two buildings, would the building itself become too big in scale to the kids as they approach the building. So we've taken care, I think, to scale it down as the building interacts with the children in the community.
Thank you.
What I was going to point out on the architectural, can you show him on the middle school what the themes that you've kept in place, kind of keep it
Yes.
based on the 1931 building?
If you turn it around, I'll probably ask a question about that.
No more questions on this end. Okay, this is the 30s building as it sits right now with the two low structures here. And then as we add on to it, we're essentially enveloping that connector link, if you will, and picking up on the architectural detail of this building in terms of the fenestration, in terms of the detail around the stuff. And also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the form of the middle school entry picks up in relationship, at least, not precisely given, but that form of the
There was some discussion, too, about the approach coming up Scott Dyer Road of giving something that looked more uniform
this here.
here.
And I think that in your package, there are a couple of photographs that sort of highlight that view as you move.
Right now, it's not a pretty picture as you approach up Scott Dyer.
No.
You could see even the Palladium windows in the addition to kind of keep in the theme.
I found the $50,000.
Quick.
Tell us.
The correct number for the systems and service renovation is $2,121,780, and we were hurriedly stuffing sheets to correct that page into the book in the car on the way over. I miscopied that number as $2,171,780. So
Well, the important thing is it leaves the bottom line the
Right.
same number.
Correct,
Good.
that's right. Thank you for pointing that out.
Could you just clarify what happens with the fields under this site plan? Because people have raised to me what happens to the fields if you're adding on a road. Those fields remain intact on the other side of the middle school?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, this field on the outside of the middle school remains as it is. We looked at, through the process of design, we looked at a variety of configurations which did a lot of damage to that field, and really had the middle school extending out into the field, and the committee concluded that the program for the site should be to maintain all of those fields, improve the parking, and that's what this solution does.
Any further comments from the board? Is there anybody from the,
One
you
more,
have another one?
one more on the budget. In your square footage estimates for new construction, major renovation systems, have you found those in your experience to be pretty much on target? Unless you find some uncertainties when you start.
Yeah, I would say that we had, Charlie. We're going to be continuing to refine those as we go through the summer, but so far we found those to be those to be reasonably accurate. And again, we'll know a little bit better. I think the one number which we've talked about at the committee that we're really not sure of at this point in time in terms of how it's going to impact the total cost, although I feel reasonably certain that our overall budget is okay, is the whole exterior envelope situation, which needs some more attention. But in terms of interior renovation, I think that's probably pretty close to what our experience has been.
And the administrative and fees, is there any flexibility or play, or is that?
There is, and I basically restructured that a little bit so it would be clearer. The number there, which is $2 million something or other for administrative and fees, is based on experience that shows that about 75% of a total project cost is construction cost. And that, again, we found that to be a very accurate determinant on school after school after school in terms of setting your soft cost budget. If you have 75% for construction and 25% for administrative and fees, it's about right. But that is where that number came from, as those of you who have sat on the committee know, and that there has not been, and it's really difficult, or if not impossible, to come up with a line-by-line item for that this early in the project in terms of knowing what those numbers are going to be.
I thank you for detailing. That helps us to understand what's in those costs.
Is there anybody from the public who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Scott, sure.
My name is Scott Woolen. At this stage of the project, has anybody given any consideration to air quality for the buildings? I know there's a lot of additions throughout this whole process, and how will the air quality be affected through this process?
Well, I guess the first part of the answer is that we are totally replacing the mechanical systems, including all the ventilation in both of the buildings. The second part of the question, in terms of some of the things that are being thought of, we are as part of the asbestos study, Northeast Test Consultants is looking at the whole environmental quality of the building as they walk through it with us this summer. I think certainly there are many new concerns about carpeting, which we didn't have a few years ago. We're just completing a new middle school, which I think if we were going to do it again, we would probably put less carpet in the building than we did. But we're certainly very conscious of that. The other thing that we're reviewing within the existing spaces this summer is the lead paint issue. And that's not something that's mandated that we need to do anything with, except in environments with kids under 6 years of age. But it is something that we're advised that is going to come down the pike fairly soon, and we probably should be prepared for it. So we're thinking about that as we go along too.
Paul?
I'd like to point one thing out that was not discussed, I think, in trying to just the overview, and that's the accessibility issue, particularly with those that are requiring wheelchairs or in the vertical accessibility within the building. What we have basically done is added in 2 elevators, one for the middle school and one for the elementary school. All of the other aspects of vertical circulation are handled via ramps. That, with a difference in elevation between Pond Cove and the middle school, this area is ramped in this location and again here, as well as ramps in this location with stairs, so that we've tried to minimize mechanical means of having people move from one level to another level, and only limited that to 2 specific locations. And I think it shortens the path and something that we were very, very concerned with.
Rosemary?
Yes.
You have a
Paul,
question?
on that, does that mean that all users of the building will be using the ramps? Or are they
Not
separate?
necessarily, because if you look at this, we've been calling them
Knuckle.
knuckles. And this is a small one. As the corridor moves here, there's a series of steps. So most of the students can travel in that path, but there is a ramp which meets the code requirements for height and length and that type of thing. And we've been able to develop that in these locations. So it depends on exactly how high we have to go for the length of that ramp.
In all cases where there is a ramp, there is also a stair.
Thank you.
There is one lift
Yes.
and the
Yes.
stage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Right in this,
The yellow.
this location right here. Again, that is for minimal usage, and it's not traffic going through the school, but specifically for that function. The other thing that we, while we're on the stage, that I don't think was pointed out as clearly as it might have been, is there is a folding petition in the cafetorium is leveled, 3 different levels, split directly in the center, half for middle school, half for Pond Cove. When this is closed, it acts as a cafeteria. Once it's open, it acts as a level stage area, so that the stage opens to that space and can be used by how many people? roughly?
The cafeteria,
Cafeteria.
575.
So it has a double function, and in such a manner that we still need the cafeterias, but we're able to have the public space as well.
And the stage area can be partitioned off, so that has usage also.
Any further questions or comments? Connie?
Thank you. I just want to compliment both the members of the building committee, the teachers, and the administrators who have very faithfully come as what is typically called an advisory committee, but I think really an integral part of the discussions, and obviously the architectural firm. It has been an enormously complex task, and Jeff White, who's sitting here this evening, as a member of the building committee, was also involved, as were Charlie and Ann and myself, with the School Space Study Committee, just to give people in the community a sense of what the scope of this is. 2/3 of our buildings, our entire school system, are under the gun here. We have to deal with this issue. Just today, for instance, the fire trucks were called out to Pond Cove because staff tried to turn on a light in the art room, and a small fire ensued. A problem that's not necessarily tied to the total rundown conditions of the buildings, but one that I understand was probably traceable to the way that had been put in initially. Nevertheless, every day there is some kind of failure of some piece of the infrastructure that we're dealing with here, and it's affecting, actually in numbers, it's affecting well over 2/3 of our students, because the bulk of our students are in these two buildings. The scope of the problem has been, as I said, very complex, very time-consuming. 2 years ago, this summer, some of us spent a number of long, hot evenings looking at, or afternoons, looking at the school space study analysis. And just to remind you, we were struggling to figure out what grades ought to go in what building. We knew that the community wanted an accountability study of the high school. Could the high school be used to solve our school space study problems? We did, in fact, decide that it could hold one more grade. We went through the steps that are necessary to make that decision, and beginning with this year, had a kindergarten in there. All of this is part of looking at the buildings we have and how we can make best use of them and reconfigure them for another generation. I really think it's important for people to understand that this particular approach does try, as the architect said, to make the best use of what we have, but at the same time make some tough decisions about what needs to go. There are no easy decisions in this, and I think those of us who are working with the project have no illusions about the difficulty of selling the project to the community because of its expense and the necessity to get out there with information, and certainly we are prepared to do that. But I do applaud the people who've been involved with it. I personally feel that I can't think of anything more important for the health and welfare of our staff and our students than solving this problem. So I think this is a significant step, and I recommend to the board that you make a motion to carry this proposal further to the town council. I would want to emphasize this is concept design. Concept design does not have all the answers, does not have all the details, and there have been references this evening to the necessity to pin down some of the issues that have been mentioned but haven't yet been solved. But we've gone this far, and I think for some of the concept design situations I've seen, this is remarkably complete. At least we have a far better set of informational pieces and ideas about what it's going to look like than we normally see in concept design. So. Thank you.
Well, I would entertain a motion to approve the... Rosemary?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the Cape Elizabeth Middle Elementary School Concept Design Report submitted to the school board this evening, and that we send it to the town council for their consideration and approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Charles? Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? 6-0. Thank you again for that wonderful presentation, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday night at the town council.
That's right.
Okay. We now move on to the kindergarten team's request for an additional section. I will yield to the superintendent.
Thank you. We had extended discussion of this issue at our June meeting, and I did include some more information in your packet. I thought that for anybody who has not, perhaps our new board members in particular, the Kindergarten Language Arts Guide, we had some specific questions about the remarkable, I think, development of that language arts, as well as some of the beginning math programs, some discussion about the use of volunteers, as well as some of the use of paraprofessionals being made at the kindergarten. In reviewing the issues, I realized that the numbers that I included in the packet, updated numbers, have, if anything, gone down a little bit rather than going up, and it does yield a projected class size of 18, which is what the board policy uses as a guideline for kindergarten. However, I do think it is important to point out that the kindergarten staff, as part of their attempt to become ever more efficient and organized in helping children make a good transition to school, have taken some unusual steps this year, which has perhaps given us more information than has been true in the past. They have asked for more questionnaires from parents. They have made some visits to nursery schools, as well as contacting nursery school teachers for those students who might be enrolled in nursery school programs. And they have tried to reduce some of that data to percentages of children that they would feel might require some extra attention. With that in mind, and with a very large class in mind, they have continued to ask for that 10th section. And as I explained in the packet, we can, although it was not put in the budget, we can fund it from what I would say were projected savings we would see in some of the salary account lines because of changes in personnel. So I'm comfortable in recommending to you that we can add it. I have to say at the same time, I do understand that you have a policy and that it's a difficult issue for you to know when to deviate from that policy. I think some of the comments from last month did point out these are very little people who are starting school, and I think all of us, and I'm sure you agree, want to do the best we can to get them started. I did have some limited discussion with kindergarten staff about whether they were asking us to review the policy and change the numbers from 18 to 16, and at least I did not talk to each member of the kindergarten team, but those I did talk to said that they were not asking us to do that. They were asking for an exception to the policy. Do you need some help?
Would you like some?
Gee, it's nice when you put a bus in a pocket. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
That could solve the garage problem.
Take a big people's pockets, why not? Okay, are you finished with
Yes,
your
I am.
comments? Okay, any discussion, comments from the board?
Was that a recommendation?
Yes, it is.
That is a recommendation.
Yes, it is.
So you need a motion, in effect, to start discussions, or what do we?
I think there's some parents who are here who would like to speak, or at least I see some who I know have incoming kindergartners. I don't know if they want to speak or not, but I thought it would be appropriate to have board members able to comment first if they like. It's on. It was on.
Unless there's a person named Mike who's supposed to speak at this moment.
So no board members would like to speak?
I personally would like to hear if there's anybody from the
Okay.
public.
Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak? Could you come up to the podium, state your name, please?
My name is Gail Atkins, and I still have another year before my first is going to be entering kindergarten. But I have heard, which may only be rumors, and I might need some confirmation, that there are going to be a number of children entering the classrooms that are going to need a lot of additional help. And I'm in reference to some autistic children, and I'm just wondering how many children are going to be of this sort, are going to be in classrooms, and can the teachers handle it with the size of the classrooms? And is it the best thing for all of the students?
Okay, we'll see if, would one of the administrators or the kindergarten teachers like to respond?
Also, just to update your numbers, we're at 164 rather than 163 as of about 2 o'clock this afternoon. And that's the only entry we've had since Friday. What I'd like to do is just simply to review the letter that the kindergarten team wrote last week that has, I think, some valuable information in it, if that's an acceptable approach to this. The kindergarten team has collected more information regarding the incoming kindergarten group. Like every class, this group has a specific makeup of students which teachers will be required to respond to. We are concerned by the percentage of children who will need specific interventions. For example, 12% of the incoming students were deemed at risk academically. 16% are on watch for behavior issues. 9% were observed to be developmentally young. These figures are in addition to the inclusion model that the kindergarten team supports for special education students. This masks a total of 37% of incoming kindergarten students who will require some additional specific programming. And I might add that the way that this information was gathered was through kindergarten screening, through contacting the current enrollment at the nursery schools, and also in contact with individual parents at early on as well. So it's a combination of a variety of ways of finding out this information, which we haven't done this before, at least to the extent in past years. So it's fairly concrete, and it's fairly, I would say, pretty stable information at this point.
Excuse me, if I could just add, I think the specific question on autism and on students with the... In some general. Okay. We did, in fact, have, I think this year's kindergarten, perhaps one of the teachers would, or perhaps Beth, I really think it would be important to compliment the staff on the way in which not only were they coping with a change in environment, moving to a different spot, But they had some questions about dealing well with a mixed population of students and wondering how that would work. I have heard both from teachers themselves as well as from parents as well as our special education staff, I think a pretty impressive story of people working together as teams. We do, of course, add additional personnel, additional paraprofessional personnel to make it possible for children who have that need to be included, but at the same time not to drain the time as much as possible from the regular classroom teacher. This is, of course, an important first step, and we'll be moving along through the district in a variety of ways, and we can understand everybody's concerns, and we're trying to work those through. So I would, you know, there are also one of the things that I think is we have some difficulty in talking about labels. I mean, we don't want to label groups of children as being at risk and so on after all they're 5 years old. We simply want to have reasonable ways of dealing with a wide range of behavior, and I think that some of the uses that the kindergarten staff is making of volunteers is an excellent example of staff working with parents to make sure that that's a good start.
Rosemary?
Thank you. Beth, I just wanted to talk about kindergarten screening for a moment. In Cape Elizabeth, we screen in May.
That's correct.
Other schools, I'm told, as recently as yesterday, screen after the third and fourth week of school. Is that
in the incoming year?
Well, South Portland specifically. Do you think that there's a tremendous amount of change in students in 6 months, or is that a fair question to ask? We screen at 4.5, 5 years old.
We've explored that. In fact, we talked about that very seriously this past spring, and I think for a number of reasons decided to continue with the direction that we've been. I think I'd like to ask Ted to speak to that. I think that, you know, with his experience with kindergarten children as well as the screening process.
And then when Ted is through, may I ask you a follow-up?
Sure. Ted, would you be comfortable speaking to
that? The question is there a big difference at 6 months?
Or what difference does 6 months make, I guess?
It's hard to tell because we screen some kids at 4.5, but because of so a lot of older kids come to kindergarten too. Sometimes we screen kids when they're 5 years old. I've taught 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds up into other grades, and I'm reluctant to come down hard on that question one way or another. But I think the kinds of behavior patterns and the things that we've seen both at screening and also at when we made the site visits to the nursery schools indicate that we need to be careful with this particular group to make sure that we provide for them the best possible situation we can for them. We have a lot of kind of cross-referenced information from parents and teachers, and also from not just the kindergarten staff, but the teachers that we spoke to at the nursery schools. And I'm fairly comfortable that that information that we shared with you is pretty accurate in terms of what we're looking at. It's difficult, I think, for the kindergarten team to come and ask for this because we know what kind of a year it is for folks, and it's difficult budget times. But the consensus of us, and also the special education staff and the people who are doing screening, was that this is a class that we really needed to be careful with and provide them with some additional people and staff. I remember Wayne talked about the 5th grade. I don't know what he was talking about, but that grade, and he was concerned. Wayne Dorr is the special education director. I worked with that group, and I can echo his concerns. So while I wouldn't make a global judgment, I'm sure that there can be an enormous change in any individual over 6 months. But the information that we have would indicate that because of the numbers and because of the need of this particular group, that's why the kindergarten staff has asked for this exception. I think as a group, we don't feel as though 18 is an unreasonable number with a group with a different group, 18 would work. But with this particular group, we were compelled to come and ask for some additional staffing. So,
I did have another question
for Beth or for me?
for you. A lot of people didn't see last month's meeting.
I guess there was no audio, huh?
I don't know.
Right.
So a lot
Maybe
of
that
the
was better.
comments that were made last month, the public doesn't have access to or haven't heard before. So I just want to ask another question.
Sure.
In the past, I've asked how many of our students came from a preschool, nursery school situation, and Deborah suggested high 90s. And that was my first year on the board. This is my third, so 2 years ago. Would you say that that profile has changed?
Somewhat. We were surprised this year to find out that a number of incoming kindergarten students had had no previous preschool experience. I still think that the vast majority of kids who come into kindergarten do have preschool experience, but it did go down this year. We were surprised.
Do we have any idea how much? I mean, 85%, 25%?
I could get you the information. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I would say that that would pretty much be accurate. That
85?
feels comfortable to me. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And my follow-up question, I don't need you at the podium. Should we be looking at the time that screening takes place, or is May a generally accepted kind of perfect time?
Well, actually, as long as I'm here.
Okay. Well, I was interested when I asked about South Portland, and they said they wait until the third week.
I personally think that would be a mistake to screen that late. We've got a lot of data this year that we feel comfortable with, and we feel as though we can ask the people that can help us out for what we believe as professionals that we need. We feel that that's our professional responsibility to do. If we did that in October, it might be very difficult to retool, so to speak. But an additional point that might be, just as long as the subject is in the arena, that we might bring up is, we feel that when we do the screening now, it's okay for the incoming kindergarten students, but it's difficult for the existing kindergarten students, because the teachers have to leave the room, and the children have to work with substitutes for about 6 days. And we might like to look at moving it to maybe after school, if that would make sense, or at least open a discussion that would make sense to respect the children that we're working with at the time that we're working with them, and to give them the best programming we can, and then see the incoming kindergarten students at a time that makes more sense for everybody. But I think that would be, personally, and I think the team would agree, I think an October screening would not be in the best interest of the children and the staff and parents.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Okay, before you
I
leave.
feel like I'm back in class.
Reflecting back to the budget process, and we were talking about your current kindergarten class that was going on to first grade, and the first grade's concern about increasing class size. I believe they were 16, and we did eliminate a first grade position. Their concern about the type of student that was coming in, I guess you had 6 or 7 very specifically behavioral type of needs. What is different about that particular kindergarten class than the incoming kindergarten? You've had some reflection.
There is a vast difference in this year's kindergarten class moving on to first grade and this incoming kindergarten class. The 3 specific items that we listed in the letter, the percentages were much, much, much lower in terms of those 3. I think we should also add to developmentally young, chronologically young students who have a birthday that's sort of after August. So there's a bunch of those folks too. The special needs children that are being discussed had plans that existed when they came in. They had additional staff to work with them, and it worked extremely well. The children in my class had experiences I think like they've never had before in terms of meeting a person who's different and being able to appreciate them and developing and allowing and accepting attitude. The difference of this incoming class is that those percentages of behavioral issues and at-risk behavior as defined by the children failing one or more of the sections in the McCarthy preschool screening and also the Brigance preschool screening. We gave 2 tests this year. That's the first time we ever did that. Was much higher than it was last year. And the behavior issues that we saw at screening were also confirmed with site visits to nursery schools and also discussions with preschool teachers and parents. So it wasn't just the child came in and maybe, ran around or sat up in a chair and we said, well, that's definitely a behavior issue. It was much more developed than that in terms of what information we were able to get. So those are the things I think that are most different. I think 18 children, honestly, might have worked this year with the class that we had. I think that might have worked. But the kindergarten class as a whole, the teachers and the special ed staff are very concerned about this year. And that's the real reason why we're asking you for this exception.
I have one other question.
Charlie?
It has to do with the square footage of the Old Pond Cove in your existing facility. Do you have about
I'm
this?
directionally challenged, so spatially challenged. Might not be the right guy to ask.
They are a little smaller. Those rooms are a little smaller.
Yeah.
But they're laid out better.
They're a little smaller, and we also house all of the children's belongings inside the room, as opposed to we used to house them outside the room. So that we have our cubbies, because of fire laws, we have our cubbies inside the class. That takes away maybe 1.5 centers that we could have up if we didn't have those in the room. But they're excellent. We appreciate all the work that folks put into it last year.
Would little lockers help?
They might. But I still think, even with little lockers, we're looking at a class that needs some careful attention. I guess we really wouldn't ask for this if we didn't think that it was necessary and important. And I know you appreciate that, but I just want to underscore that point.
Ted, I just wanted to ask, or to clarify, that you gathered this information, the 12% were deemed at risk academically, 16% behavior issues, and 9% were observed to be developmentally young. That's the first time you have sort of developed those kind of figures around a group of children. Was that because of this specific group, or just because this year you had time to do that?
No,
or
it wasn't even because, well, we always had the time, we just hadn't got the light bulb yet.
to do it.
The reason we did it was because, I know you're a teacher, so you'll appreciate this. Sometimes you always end up with one class that might not work as well as the other 6. And that happens arguably because you just didn't get enough information about the students, or that's the assumption that we're working on. So this year, we decided that we would look more carefully at how to collect data, and so that we could make better decisions regarding classrooms, to make better communities, so that kids could work with each other better and learn more. I think it's also due to our work with the Southern Maine Partnerships. We've been working a lot with the concept of teachers as researchers, and to develop data collecting systems so that you can see where you are and then try to achieve further. So that's in keeping with the philosophy that we're working with now, that we've been working with for the past 3 years.
I guess when I look at those figures, then I think possibly those kind of percentages could be true for any class that has come through in the past 5 years. And I guess I'm worried about using those figures to decide that this class is unique in some way. I think I said this last time, but I have a child who just completed kindergarten with Ted, who probably, from interviews with his preschool teacher, would have fit in probably those 3 categories. And a lot of the things that happen in preschool don't seem to happen because of how professional a program you have in the kindergarten. From the minute those children walk in the door, they have different expectations than they have had at their preschool. A lot of them have been at their preschools for 3 years. They are very familiar with the space, the teachers, the other kids there, and you do such a good job about setting down the ground rules. I guess as a school board member, I'm torn because I'm very familiar with the kindergarten program and what great strides you make, but I look at our policy of 18 children in the kindergarten class, and I sort of feel like we need to stick with it and not vary too much, because we're sticking with it on the rest of the grade levels. We're the present fourth, or the grade going into fourth, is going to have 23.6 children in their classes, and we're not adding for them. And the current kindergarten class that's going into first grade, those teachers would have liked to have had another section because of the population of that group. And I guess I worry that we have to look at the whole picture, and that's sort of what's on my what's driving my decision on this. And I don't know if there's anybody else feeling that way. Or, Craig?
I'll take the opposite end of the spectrum. I was very impressed with the presentation by the kindergarten teachers, particularly to making this effort. I don't believe this is something they're going to do just on a yearly basis, but they honestly feel that this is a special group. Particularly, I was impressed last meeting with Wayne Dorr, who got up and spoke on behalf of special ed position. Particularly, I think what you have to look at is there is a qualitative difference between a fourth grade class, which my son is in, and a kindergarten, which is an initial presentation in school. It isn't just a yearly step system. This is the first initiation in the public school system by the kids, and I think it's very important that they get off to the right start, because if you start wrong, like you said, the fifth grade class, or they had some problems, it can follow them throughout the system. I also think it would be, as far as timing right now, we're talking about this and possibly putting this off to August. I think that it would be appropriate to act now, because I think we want to find a qualified as candidate as possible.
Any other comments?
Well, I'm of the same view. At the meeting last month, I remembered 6 years ago when we debated our 4 levels of elementary school education. We now have 2. Then we had pre-K, K, K1, and 1. And what we decided at that time was that we would put the emphasis on smaller class sizes so the children got off to a good start, and that and the principal reason for doing that was so that we got the school ready for the children and not waiting for the children to be ready for the school. And some of that was done actually before I went on the board, and some of it was done after, if I remember correctly. But I remember the debate very well, and I know that sounds like kind of a slogan, but if it stuck with me for 6 years, I obviously liked it. Get the school ready for the kids. And I think that what I hear the kindergarten team saying is we need smaller class sizes this year in order to do it. And dealing with it as an exception rather than a change in policy, I think is particularly admirable, because next year we're going to look at this again. And so if we have a motion tonight, I'm going to vote for adding the 10th section.
Any other comments, Charlie?
I agree with Beth. I think you've got to look at your policy, and if the policy is not correct, then the policy needs to be changed. I also think that you have to look at everything from a system-wide approach, and to some degree, I think in this system, in the past, we have gotten away from that. Again, I look at that fourth grade. Again, they have the large classrooms that the kindergarten vacated, so they do have more space. But looking at the type of education delivery we have in this system, it's not just sitting at little desks anymore. I mean, even in the fourth, the second, the third, there's movement around. There's, activity areas, that kind of thing. I find it very hard to see we're adding 2 more kids per classroom and still meeting the class size is going to impact the delivery of education to those kids. So I really, from a budgetary standpoint, the fact that we decreased the first grade size because their numbers were low, I really couldn't support it.
I'd like to take a moment, if it's appropriate at this point, to, in view of the fact that last month's audio wasn't, the public is not aware of some of the discussions that went on last month. A couple of things. Space is a major issue for us. If you'll recall, the size of the classrooms at the fourth grade level is somewhat larger than the kindergarten class, the size of the classes in terms of physical space. We've also approved some additional support for the larger classes at the upper levels. If you'll recall, there was we designated an additional teacher assistant that had been proposed through the budget for support at the fourth grade level. That person has been hired and will remain working in the fourth grade classes to assist those larger numbers. Believe me, I'm really anxious, as I think as you are, about the numbers as you move up to grades 3 and 4. But I would like to remind you that there are teacher assistants available at that point to assist throughout the day. The kindergarten classrooms, you're talking about a smaller physical space, larger numbers of children in that space. So we have deviated somewhat, I think, from, I mean, we've looked at the policy and set it at 18, yes, but I think there are certain considerations that need to come into play, and I felt it was important that we revisited the issue that teacher assistants are there for the upper levels.
Just as a parent who spent Monday afternoons in Ted's classroom, I feel like the space is wonderful at the high school, and that it really, having 18 kids as opposed to 16 in the physical space really probably isn't the issue here. They have very wide hallways. They have a big storage room. The space is wonderful. So I don't think we should get too bogged down on the kindergarten actual classroom size.
Rosemary?
Madam Chair, I just have a question. We have 6 members tonight instead of 7. If the vote were to be a 3-3 tie, does that mean the motion fails?
I don't know. I'm sitting and thinking the same thing.
Yes, it does.
Because we don't have our regular.
Two points. I'll gladly vote, but
we know.
Second thing is just, you probably know this, but I'm going to say it one more time. This has never just been about numbers. It's never just been about numbers. I'll just say it one more time. I know that there's a board policy, but I guess I would just ask you to take a leap of faith with the professionals who have a really strong feeling about this issue. Not only a feeling, but have I think, some valid facts to back up the data with. We're looking at potentially 1 in 3 kids who looks like they might need some extra help. And I know the kindergarten team feels, and the administration too, that there is a difference, Charlie, and with all due respect, between 15 and 18 kids in one classroom. It means more individualized attention. It means more access to the different centers that you talked about. It means more guided reading and guided writing opportunities with the volunteers. And I think sometimes that makes a big difference with a specific child, particularly the type of child that we may be talking about. So I would just want to make that last point.
I understand your needs, and I understand your argument, but I'm also trying to look at it from a total system-wide approach, and one of those is budgetary. All it's going to take is one child to move into this district with very special needs, and that could blow our budget for special ed wide open. We already know we have $150,000 more this year than we had last year. So I'm trying to keep it broad.
I guess the other thing is that we feel strongly that some of the things that may need to be mediated by a special ed intervention could possibly be helped with particular needs being met at a younger grade level. I'm aware and I'm sympathetic to all the teachers in the school and the fact that everybody looks at it from a different perspective and feels strongly and has a lot of integrity about their particular grade level. But the kindergarten team has made some important curriculum decisions with the help of the administration and the guidance from community members. With their support, we've been able to make fairly significant strides in the last 3 years. And I think that another thrust of our argument is that we want to continue to provide the same kind of quality for children and parents that we have done in the past. And that's why, after carefully thinking about it and collecting information, we came and asked for this exception. So, thanks for your consideration.
Peter?
Go ahead.
No, please.
You haven't said anything.
Well, I'm waiting.
Well, I think Ted makes a number of good points, and I think one of the most important is that the kindergarten team has obviously put a lot of effort into this and given it a lot of thought, and I think it presented it very, very skillfully. And if we had a competing team up here from the 4th grade, then I think it would be a very different debate. But the 4th grade team has obviously looked at the numbers. I judge they have, and have decided that they can do quite well as it's presently situated. So I don't think we should relate the debate to the size of the 4th grade class, or for that matter, the size of the 5th grade class. The budget point, I think, we have the superintendent's recommendation. At least I thought it was the recommendation that we do this, and that obviously includes consideration of the budgetary issues. I don't personally think that it's such a big number that our budget could be blown out of the water or not blown out of the water by this particular move. It's true that there are other things, and we've seen them, that do blow us out of the water on budgets. They're always out there, but I don't think this is one of them.
I just, excuse me, just wanted to remark from the perspective of having been present of the review of the children, all of the children who went through screening last year and all the children who went through screening this year. We sit together at the end of each day of screening, and it was very remarkable to me the numbers of children who appeared to be very high profile. I think, as Ted suggested, perhaps every 3rd child. And by the time we were halfway through the screening process, I could see that there was a recognizable difference from the previous year in just looking at the needs of the children. I certainly didn't keep track of numbers and didn't go back and revisit it in detail as the kindergarten team did, but it was remarkable as we went along relative to the previous year.
Beth, as a follow-up to that, so many of our new students coming in have not yet been special needs, special services identified, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're assuming with this 37%, which may or may not be a normal profile because this is the first year we've developed this profile, that as many as half of these 37% may receive additional services?
They may have to at some point, yes.
I've made my decision. Thank you.
Any other comments? Jill?
My name is Jill Mallory, and I'm a parent of a now 2nd grader, and my daughter will be going into kindergarten, not this year, but next year. And I'd just like to say that that we, as a school system, have an excellent kindergarten team. We've hired highly trained professionals. We've looked at these people really carefully before we've brought them into the system. And having a kindergartner 2 years ago, I know that as a fact because I worked closely with them. And I'd just like to say that I think it's important that after we go through such a involved process to hire these people, that we respect their professional opinion, especially when they've gone through such an effort to try and bring you their best knowledge that they can. And I think that's a task that the board needs to take seriously also. Here in Cape Elizabeth, we get the cream of the crop because we have a good reputation of a school system that is nice to teach in. And I'd like to see it remain that way, and I think one of the ways that it will remain that way is for us to respect the recommendations of the professionals that we've hired.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Madam Chair, members of the school board, my name is John Delahanty. I apologize that I'm not as facile talking about education as my wife, who used to teach, but since we have 4 children, she left teaching to take care of the children. 2 of our children are already in the school, somewhat system-wide, one going to the 4th grade, one into 7th, and we're blessed to have twins entering into kindergarten. So naturally, we're extremely concerned with regard to the makeup of the kindergarten class. Our son going into the 7th grade is in a large class, population-wise, and we understand from what we've heard is that the kindergarten class likewise will be extremely large. That in and of itself would not be of a concern, and my wife and I have discussed this, but when we heard about the information which the extremely dedicated, well-trained, loyal staff has put together, we did become extremely concerned because of the attention that the children which will need additional attention will take from the teachers themselves. Cape Elizabeth is indeed fortunate to have volunteers, but I don't think the school board should fall back on the use of volunteers to supplement the teachers when the professionals which you have hired are saying, we have a unique situation here, who have really, as I understood it, and listening somewhat this evening, really have put together an extremely detailed case. Granted, they may not have done all this testing previously, but I think given their unique position and having observed a number of classes through the years, now using this testing, going out into the community and talking with the nursery school teachers, have really come to a decision which I think is extremely important for the kindergarten children that are entering this year. And it's like opening up a vast new world to them. And if this first experience is extremely disruptive to them, I am extremely concerned that it would carry over into another year and a year beyond. This is the introduction to the public school system. And I think that, excuse me, with the superintendent having identified, excuse me, funding for this additional section, and should there need to be additional funding, I'm confident it could be found for possibly that special need. We would certainly highly endorse and strongly support the kindergarten team's recommendation for an additional section. It is a process where there are a certain group of children, possibly as high as 37%, maybe they're underestimated. But there's a certain group that do get attention. There are some that really don't need it. But when you have a vast group that has been brought to your attention of potential additional needs, I think this really is unique, and I sincerely hope that you would follow the recommendation of the kindergarten team and vote for the additional section. I'm not sure how many were in each kindergarten class this year. I heard 14 or 15. If you go up from 14 to 15 per class to 18, at least in each class, with potentially substantially additional needs, I think that is really putting substantial pressure on each member of the kindergarten team. They are very good, they are dedicated, but I think you are really stretching them if you don't add that additional section. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Steve Barber, and I've been a resident of this town since I was a little one, and went to the schools, well, through all the schools except for the new high school. So I have a pretty good feel for this situation. And one of the things that caught me, Rosemary was talking, or when you made your decision, if these classes are developed with the 18 kids, and that there is a problem with them, what's going to happen? I mean, what's going to happen dollar and cents wise? Does that make a big impact on the budget if a lot of special ed training's got to come in? That's a question. Connie, maybe you can help that.
I'm a little
I
unclear
understand the
as to
question.
Hmm?
I understand the question, so I
Okay.
can. Steve, what it means is there's 12% of the incoming students are deemed at risk academically.
Okay.
It is a non-debatable item when these students are identified for special services, whether budgeted or not, we provide the services.
Okay.
And 12% of the class is normal
Okay.
for every grade.
My question is, what happens, okay, when it comes November and the elementary team is correct? Okay, there is a problem. How are you going to solve the problem then?
Well, obviously, the discussion is going on now because it's not the ideal time to solve the class size problem. We had a couple of occasions, I think it was 2 years ago, to discuss a class that had been kind of borderline going into the fall. And, it's in small systems, you hope that maybe some people will move out, no more move into that grade. We began to realize we were right up there with the state max, which is 25, by the way. And we discussed whether or not we should add another section. It was not a money issue at that point. It was as much as it was an issue whether that's the appropriate thing to do. And we added teacher assistants because we did not want to disrupt the relationships that had already been formed between children and their teacher. So, that's the kind of thing that the decision should be made before then.
Okay. My question is, let's say, and I'm in full agreement with the other parents that have spoken and members of the board that have spoken for the extra help, that the very qualified group of people who have requested have come and requested on to the board. But what happens if it gets to November that this doesn't pass and we've got a real problem with, now it's my child and it's other people that are in this group? What's going to happen?
Well, a lot of what we do is to try to predict what's the best way to deal with it. And I think the issue here is a tough one because it's a fail-safe issue. That's why you have policies. In other words, policies keep us from having the argument on every class all the time, every year. We have kind of a rule of thumb. Kindergarten, I think, is a special issue. People have said that repeatedly now for 2 meetings. They don't really need me to say it again. But I think that it is because these are actually, it's children coming in who kind of define themselves and the teachers define themselves as learners in a formal setting. We don't know. They don't know. This may actually turn out to be a class with fewer problems than the indications are. So the judgment issue, and people have been talking about it, we're turning to people who tell us we see certain indications. That's all they are. They're not guarantees that we're going to have one way or the other, just indications. And we're trying to make that decision, frankly, based on their experience. I think people have, that's why I'm recommending it, frankly, because they are people who are dealing with the issue. And I have sympathy for board trying to make these decisions because it's tough. We go through the budget. We have lots. I mean, everybody wants, you've said it, their lens, and the decision will be made, and we will, as far as what we will do in November, hope it will be, we will certainly, I know, I extremely confident in their staff. Regardless of what the decision is, the staff will certainly do its best.
I would just like to again point out that this staff, nobody's had anything but praise to stay safe for this, or to stay safe for the staff, excuse me. And I would be extremely disappointed in this group for not going along with the staff, in that I believe this is a special exception from what's been told. The 4th grade class isn't here. The 7th grade class isn't here, and the other groups aren't here, but this is a group of people that's come to say, hey, we've got a potential problem here, and listen. The superintendent supports it. There's money available for it. And to me, I just think it's something that really needs to get done. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Suzanne?
My name is Suzanne Higgins. I have a son who's entering kindergarten and a daughter who's entering 4th grade next year. I guess I don't have a lot to add to what already has been said. I have taught K through 3rd graders. I've taught in a Head Start program with a lot of children who are at risk, and in a private school situation. I would even argue that 15 children in a kindergarten class would be an optimal number. And I think 18 with children who a certain number of children who are at risk is a maximum number. And that in Cape Elizabeth, we should be striving to do the optimal best for our children. I think that last in the Courier there was mention of volunteers in the classroom, and I think that we shouldn't rely on volunteers. I think the critical mass of children in the classroom is critical, and that volunteers can work with small groups of children, but the children have to interact with that number of kids in the classroom. And if it's a higher number than I think is optimal, I think it's difficult for the child who may have troubles with large masses. So I would urge the board to add an additional class. I think an additional class will still keep the number at 16.5 children per room, which I think would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I would just like to make a couple of comments. First, on the issue of why the 4th grade isn't here. I obviously can't speak for them directly. I haven't talked to any of them about this issue, but I think it would be reasonable to guess that some of them aren't here because when we made that decision, we were very clear that we were trying to be as consistent as we could with our class size guidelines across the board throughout the whole elementary school. And so that may be one reason why they aren't here. I guess I'd also like to know exactly what is the specific programming that kindergarten teachers would be doing that would be different if you had 16 kids in a class rather than 18, when we still don't know how many of those kids are going to be in the special ed, under the wing of special ed, because they haven't been identified yet. Is that correct? How many of these children? Well, it doesn't matter.
Maybe I can, if this may be a fairly simple question to answer, and if it is, fine. Otherwise, essentially, what happens in special ed, the screening is a part of the state requirement to try to identify some things that might not be available, but some information is available in advance. Children who have had some special needs identified beforehand. Otherwise, children typically come into kindergarten without any attempt to tag or label, partly, of course, from the age and partly from a fear of making a mistake and that kind of thing. So the year goes by and into the first grade or later in the kindergarten before any kind of absolute referral process is entered into, correct?
Well, it seems to me then, in effect,
Well, I knew it probably wasn't going to be that simple, but.
Any child that comes in that that doesn't look as though kindergarten is working for them, there's contact early made with the parents, and a specific plan, depending on what their need might be, is drawn up for them. And it might be a highly individualized plan. We do this for it could be a behavior modification plan where a child would have a checklist of behaviors. Could be the simplest thing, like today the child will sit for 5 minutes at meeting rather than the 2.5 that they had previously. And this plan needs to be developed and worked out with the child and with whatever special ed staff is called in, even on a consulting basis. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the child goes through the pupil evaluation team process.
but there will presumably be special ed support for many of these children, whether or not we change the class size. Is that a reasonable assumption?
No,
That
it is
it's
not
that
initially.
If
no.
you have 12% of incoming students deemed as at risk academically, they wouldn't necessarily get any intervention?
No.
Then I don't understand necessarily what the point is of identifying them.
Because we feel as professionals that we need to develop plans, even if we don't have the special, I think maybe this is the clarifying point, and Connie, you can help me out with this. A plan would eventually be drawn up for that child, but they would have to go through the process of being evaluated, going through an extra testing process.
Yeah.
And then that's a turnaround time, a significant turnaround time. It could sometimes go into at least the second half of kindergarten, if not the beginning of first grade.
But that is a procedure that's ongoing for any class of kindergartners. That's what I'm trying to
It
get at.
typically does not. Now, I realize that these are evolving issues, but my experience over the years, and correct me if I'm making a misstatement here, we deliberately do not try to go through the same kind. Remember, the regulations for special ed are quite detailed. They do take a great deal of observation and time and so on. So at the very least that would happen at kindergarten is that you would have some concerns raised, and maybe second semester you might call in somebody for observation. So those children are not identified going into the grade. They're certainly not going to be identified right off, because the nature of kindergarten is to try to give everybody kind of a period of time to just be themselves and see what's happening. The point is not to label all kinds of problems prematurely special education. That would be a great disservice to children. So it's one of the reasons why at kindergarten level, some of these risky or unclear behaviors do become more problematic, because special ed really doesn't operate at the kindergarten except for very severe or very well-defined situations that generally exist before they even come to our doors. Isn't that correct?
Yep, the state law requires that we screen children to find out if there's specific difficulties that they have. And we use that process to identify children who may have specific difficulties, and we call them at risk. That's the terminology that we use that is accepted when at screening. And the stuff that I've been articulating to you tonight is based on the 2 tests that we give now. If children fail a section of those tests, one or more section, then they are deemed at risk. And now we cross-correlated that information with the child's classroom performance at the nursery schools to try to get the best developed information to share with you. That's how we got the data, and that's what we're operating on.
I think it's ironic in a sense that we've already labeled a large portion of this incoming class. I would suggest that the information you've collected is extremely valuable for you as teachers in terms of meeting the individual needs of the kids in your classroom, but that it is indeed premature to label these children as you have, because I think once you've done it in any sense of the term, those kids are marked. We're already talking about this as being a difficult class. I would suggest it is very important for you to have this information, but it is largely anecdotal information, and I think, with your increased data collection process, we should take the opportunity to use this year to see how it works out, how, the anecdotal evidence you've gotten fits in with the actual performance of the kids, and how the program works, since you have this information early enough to work with it.
Shall I respond?
If you'd like.
This is not, the information that we had earlier I would call anecdotal. Sitting around the table having one test, a conversation with the parent, I would say that was much more anecdotal than the information that we have now. And this is the best we can do now for you. And the collection of individuals that have worked on this are very concerned. And I think that would be a mistake to use this as a data collecting year and let's see what happens. I think that would be a disservice to the children and their families.
I just still haven't heard what specifically would be different in the classrooms with the 16 rather than 18 that would, in terms of, I haven't heard anybody wanting to change the policy for kindergartners. And
some
while we
people
don't
do.
have from the administrators or from the staff,
I think we've clearly articulated that, and I don't know how much better I can do that for you.
I'm just, that's just my feeling.
The data that we've collected, we feel clearly shows that this group of children is going to need more individualized attention from teachers, is going to need different kinds of programming that I've been trying to outline to you in terms of the kinds of plans that we'd make for individual children, whether or not they would be, quote, labeled through the special ed PET process. The at-risk label is accepted, and it's what we're encouraged to use during the process. It's another process. Another thing you could say is monitor. That would be another thing. I don't know if you'd feel more comfortable with that phrase, but that's another thing that we use. We put children on monitor because they have had difficulty with one or more of these tests. And our the only reason we're doing this is because we are concerned about this particular group, and we feel that it would be in their best interests of the children and their families to provide one other half-time teacher. The classroom already exists, and will be pretty much sitting there in the afternoon, not used. So there's not an extra classroom startup expense, which is significant. That is not an issue. It's a staffing issue, one half-time person.
On the other hand, from a system-wide basis, it is a...
I understand. I don't want to. I really, my purpose is not to argue with you about this.
I just want to make it clear that as a board member, I think any class can and has made a compelling argument why that particular class of students should warrant more attention, more resources than another. And I guess it's our job to juggle whether we feel like that case has been made sufficiently. I would just like to stress that certainly I, as a school board member, I don't think anybody else wants to do anything that's educationally unsound.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
And I know you know that.
I'm just expressing my opinion, and I feel the opinion of the team, and that's what I was sent here to do. I'm not trying to make you guys out to be the ones in the black hats at all.
Ted, how would you have described the kindergarten class that just finished up if we were talking to you last summer? What would your concerns have been about that group of children? Because I think everybody is aware that that is a very unique group also.
My concerns would have been specifically about the inclusion model and how effective that would be. And with the help of some wonderful people, Marilyn Dale and Wayne Dorr, that was exceptionally effective this year.
Was the class size a big issue in your mind at this time last summer?
Well, I think any teacher that you speak to has an idea of their optimum class size, and probably dealing with arguably less complicated issues than a board does in terms of money and financing. Teachers would want to keep their numbers low. I think that makes a difference. That can make a difference. However, the year before, I would not have come, though, last year and worried about about numbers. The negotiations that we had with the special ed team, and we were also thinking a lot about moving last year too, so that was the big issue. But they listened carefully. We talked to them. We understood what it was that they were planning, the kind of team approach that we would use with the inclusion model. And as I said before, it was remarkably successful. The year before, when I taught kindergarten, I had 17 children in my class in both sessions, and I would not have come to you and asked you, nor I think the other kindergarten team members would come to you and ask you for this exception.
Although the first grade team that is getting the kindergartners that just finished up, we're certainly very concerned about class size in terms of this unique group coming into first grade.
I think, and I'll just say this, I think that's because they're using the inclusion model and they're the team approach for the first time, and I think they're feeling some of the same kinds of growing pains that we were.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just want to stress that each group is unique in so many different ways.
That's right. And it's our feeling that due to the specific uniqueness of this group, that this kind of a two-night discussion, was warranted.
Mm-hmm.
I just got to keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
It is unique, and I appreciate that. But I think there's different uniquenesses.
Yeah.
too,
No, I
arguably.
totally agree. And I guess my problem is, I don't feel like I have the statistics to show that this incoming group is unique. We might have seen this 37% with, the current third grade class or the current, but we did know that this kindergarten class that just finished was very unique. So I guess we do have to look back at our policies.
I think that maybe I think that's for the board and the public and the people to decide together. I'll give my feeling and the feeling of the kindergarten team about the specific uniquenesses. We were talking about 6 children in the inclusion model. That does not equal 37% with different kinds
But
of
there might
needs.
have been 37% of the other kids because we didn't gather this information.
Well, the best I can do for you about that is echoing what Beth said. In
Yeah.
discussions that we had, the discussions that occurred in terms of going over each child's screening interview and the discussion with their parents was totally different last year and the year before last than it was this year. There were not the numbers of children raised. It just wasn't as
Have the
as
nursery school
conclusive.
teachers just said, oh, this is just the worst class in the world,
No,
we can't
they've
wait to get rid of
professionally
them?
articulated specific needs and things that we would need to look at with individual children. Coming from the integrity of their work, they haven't, no one's thrown their head back and gone, oh my God, people have been extraordinarily professional and trying to help each step of the way articulate what the needs would be of this group.
It's interesting because my current child going into third grade, her nursery school class was labeled as just the toughest group those teachers had ever had, and as it turned out, that group has gone on and been fine. But that was their reading of that as the toughest group.
Well, okay, one thing about that, I don't think that group had the same, see, the whole thrust of the argument is needs of the class and high numbers. If we were talking about a class that had maybe 15, 14 children in it, and it had the same kind of, we might not be having this discussion either. It's the combination. And I know it's hard to take a policy, when you have a policy, I know how folks like to stick to those and dealing with the fairness issue. But we are asking for an exception based on our best position and information that we can give you at this time.
Okay, thanks, Ted. If we can wrap this up, we've been on a...
Very brief comment.
Okay, brief.
Brief. One of the arguments I've heard tonight is we're arguing statistics, and I think the sort of try to be the logical argument, since we don't have statistics last year, therefore these statistics aren't valid. And I have to believe that, particularly I've heard from Beth and from Ted, that while we have these numbers, what they're really relying on is their experience with other classes. They've seen the numbers, 37, 32. That doesn't make any difference. They're saying that they're seeing a substantial difference between this class. And on any kind of cost-benefit analysis, it seems to me the arguments are we don't look at the policy. We're looking at the policy. We've got to stick with the policy. And a hypothetical, maybe we're going to have a problem in the budget. that to me, weighing on that side, erring on the side that some would have some real problems come this fall, I don't think that there's really much of an argument.
Rosemary?
Since you want to wrap it up,
Yes.
I have one comment and then I'll make a motion.
Great.
The fourth grade class were here in a different forum, asking the same thing, and had very strong arguments as well. And for the people who didn't know that, I met with the whole team, and there were a lot of discussions before that decision was made. So I just want people to know that there are many groups who are asking for basically the same thing. And when I, as a board member, and the board as a whole makes a decision, we are trying to do what's best for the children. Sometimes we make decisions that aren't or we vote for decisions that are not what is being asked for. And I will give you an example of the kindergarten move, which we were lobbied for weeks and months not to approve, and then we did, and it ended up being an excellent decision. So, without further comment, I would like to ask the board to consider a motion to uphold the policy of 18 students per kindergarten class and hold at 9 sections.
There's a second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? 4-10. Okay, the next item on the agenda is new business, and the first item is goals, and I defer to you, Connie.
Okay. All I have, frankly, I took the ones that people had given me, prepared a sheet, doesn't need any real explanation. I did this over the weekend, so you haven't had a chance to look at it. And it is certainly in preliminary form. I've explained the process that I'm recommending, which is to put it on the August agenda. Just remind people to get those in if you haven't already done so. And that I will continue to try to organize and classify, and I've made some other suggestions there that you can look at and process later.
Okay. The next item is personnel requests, and I'll defer to the superintendent.
Yes, we have, I might as well go right down through these, because frankly, I see no reason, to separate them. If for any reason you want to separate them, you certainly can. The personnel issues are, we have a resignation from Jill Strauss, who was our part-time gifted and talented teacher at the middle school this year. We have Scott Poulin on the agenda to be appointed as our new business manager. He's already spent his first day, or his first evening, hadn't been appointed. I did include a sheet with some background information on Scott. He has been serving as an assistant business manager at the school district in SAD 52. His business experience before that, I think I forgot to put on here, Scott, that you have a career there as a fast food manager, right? Which, since you'll be dealing with the cafeteria as one of your duties, I thought I might note that. The next item on personnel is the appointment of our interim high school assistant principal, who is patiently here, Randy Ray, who needs no introduction. People certainly have been in the system know Randy well. Has actually been here in the system since 1970. When we looked that up, Randy, I thought that was really remarkable. Did serve a previous stint as an interim high school assistant principal in 83, 84. Actually, I think it was part of another year, too. And I'm happy to nominate Randy. Going on, there are also 2 sheets of co-curricular in your package. One are nominations for team leaders at Pine Cove and the high school, and also on a separate sheet, co-curricular positions, which are, in addition, we appointed the team leaders last month from the middle school, so that's an additional list. I also want to note that in your packet for our interim high school assistant principal, We included sheets that, frankly, we worked through, particularly with Rick, our new high school principal, to make clear to you what our best sense of the duties, goals, and responsibilities of those two positions will be. You could make one motion to accept all of those nominations, or you could separate the motion if you wish.
Rosemary?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, but I'd like to make a quick comment. I served on the interview committee that hired Scott Poulin, and I just would like the public to know I think we have an excellent person taking over that position, and I ask the board to vote on a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendations for the new positions she just named for the 1993-94 school year.
Include the resignation.
Including the resignation of Jill Strauss, please.
Your second? Second. Any further discussion? Charlie?
I would just like to comment on the interim high school assistant principal. It took quite a bit to get to the point where we're at, and to have these goals and responsibilities, I think, is an improvement. I wish that we had these even last year, but I think these are very important from every building to know specifically what the duties and responsibilities of all our administrators and to a degree all the staff. Being a one-year interim position, I strongly support this.
All in favor? All opposed? None? 6-0. Okay, we've reached the end of our agenda on this hot night. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations.
So moved.
All in favor? Second? Any further discussion? All in favor? 6-0.